It's time for Dialogue Conspiracy with political research specialist Mae Brussell, who for 3 years has shared with us her decades' research into political assassinations and abuses of power in this country. Her program relates the news of the week to emerging evidence about the conspiracy which allegedly maintains by force its control over the legislative and judicial processes in America. And now, here's Mae.
Good afternoon. This is Mae Brussell in Carmel, California. Dialogue Conspiracy number 188. And this is March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, a warm, sunny day out here in Carmel, a beautiful day. For those of you who live here in Carmel, I'm smiling. Dick Gregory's comments were on just preceding the show here at KLRB and set the mood for the lecture or the sermon or the lesson and the investigation that we're going into today. My mind is racing with many thoughts because the news is just tumbling in. The work that I've done for 11 years is just about coming to a head, and the leaks are coming out through the headlines on the radio, talk shows, and the front pages, the Chicago Tribune, the San Francisco Examiner, the editorials. It's all coming out in a gush, and we'll take a few of those things today. The front page of the San Francisco Chronicle Examiner yesterday had an article, the CIA inquiry revives the JFK Oswald mystery. We'll talk about that. It's from Jim Squire's article in the Chicago Tribune, made the front page of the San Francisco Sunday Examiner and Chronicle. The next article is an editorial by Dick Nolan from the San Francisco Examiner and Chronicle called Cloak and Stagger. This is a very important article because it's from what I call the establishment press. It's nothing new to those of you who read the alternative press, but for the establishment press to speak about the mystery in California, that we have our unfinished business with the Robert Kennedy, and we have to go into the John Kennedy murder. We'll discuss that. And then there was another article in the editorial page of the same paper yesterday, 3 separate articles, 3 different sections, called The CIA Linked to Death Plot Against Castro. It was a summary of the news events of the week, but it had several allegations there. The important one was the claim of CIA agents in Mexico City in 1963 that they contacted Lee Harvey Oswald in September before John Kennedy was killed. 2 CIA agents were on a grassy knoll in Dallas at the time of the Kennedy killing and may have fired the fatal shots. So those are 3 large articles we'll talk about, run through those briefly and analyze just what all of this means in just one day's news. Over this last weekend, Aristotle Onassis died. He's very much a part of the Kennedy saga, ways that we will not know for a while or ever. He met with Jacqueline Kennedy for the first time just before the motorcade in Dallas. It was in the summer of '63. She went to Onassis's yacht in Greece and recovered from the birth and also the death of her last child. That was her 4th child, the one that passed away. And John Kennedy sent wires or cables to the effect, get yourself home quick. And if this assassination was planned as far back as I believe it was, and documents link it to the National Security Council in 1960, then I'm sure that all contingencies had to be made for Robert Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy. We'll never know. As I say, maybe it will take many, many years for this story to unfold, but I'm sure it's all there in time. Jacqueline was with Aristotle Onassis and met him 3 months before the assassination. When she returned to Washington, D.C., it was published several times that he was the first person in the White House to visit her after her husband's death. 4 years later, they were married. A servant of Onassis alleged several years ago that there was a vault that he owned which maintained the entire story of the John Kennedy assassination. This may have been the reason why his son was murdered. When his son was murdered, it literally ended his life, and from that time on, Onassis never recovered. I wrote an article for Playgirl, December '74, alleging that Onassis was responsible for the burial of Howard Hughes off of the island in Greece, April 18th, 1971. Many stories are going to go with Onassis, just like with the passing of Allen Dulles and Earl Warren, the JFK saga is losing part of the people who are very close and much a part of this story, and they have gone now. I'm sure that in time it'll be quicker to uncover the truth with some of the masters not around and no feelings hurt. The New York Times today, James Reston, has an article, Clean Sweep of the CIA, New Leadership Needed. Reston has always defended the Warren Report. The New York Times has been notorious for putting down the researchers of political assassinations and conspiracies, and now that it's eking out as a natural consequence of the Watergate affair, and it's time for these truths to be told, James Reston is not crying for the truth. He's crying for the removal of people in office and to, as much as to conceal the truth, and let's just get new people appointed and get on with the job. The article that he has in the New York Times says the main hope for the survival of an effective CIA now lies in the clean sweep of its present leadership and the creation of a powerful new joint committee of the Congress to oversee its future activities. The first rule of the spy business is that spies are expendable. If they embarrass the government, they are disowned. It is a hard, sometimes unfair, but often necessary rule that should be applied not only to the spies, but to the men who give them their orders. The CIA has not failed, but it has been caught fiddling in the liberties of private citizens, and it is an embarrassment to the government. The best way to aggravate the embarrassment now and weaken the CIA even more is to prolong the current investigations, retain the present leaders, and publicize all the crimes of the past. He said President Ford has handled the problem as if it were a common case of government corruption. He has all the evidence he needs to change the leadership of the CIA, which has been less than candid. And he goes on to say that William Colby, the head of the CIA, has not had the grace to resign. He should resign, and that these people should be removed, and that we should not prolong investigations. Now, that's a typical James Reston response, and that was the response with the Watergate. Let Richard Nixon resign. Don't open up the extra tapes. Destroy tapes. Don't call witnesses in who destroyed the evidence. Let everybody off. Charge them with a cover-up, not for a crime, just for perjury and cover-up, not for what they were doing to this country, and get on with the show, as if that is going to solve the problem. It won't solve the problem. James Reston never helped us solve the first problem, and being as he bungled 11 years on exposing very well-known evidence of conspiracy right from the beginning, he now says, okay, man, you got caught, step down, you've embarrassed us, and let's not open up everything. He said, let's not prolong these investigations and publicize the crimes of the past. I certainly think that the crimes of the past, the killing of John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and about 1,000 other persons should be thoroughly exposed, because just resigning is not enough. And the outline I have of Murderville, USA would be a good way to begin to expose these people and try them as war criminals and not accept a resignation. They have made war against the citizens of the United States, and they should stand up and face what they did publicly in full congressional hearings like a Nuremberg trial. And it takes the New York Times, who covers up, to put a layer of cover-up or suggestion, but it's not going to work, and the evidence will still be sticking around. The local news I forgot to say at the beginning of this show, I will be speaking at Hartnell College in Salinas tomorrow night at 8 p.m. I have not spoken in the local community, hardly at all, in my own local community, even though I go away to speak at other colleges. I did speak briefly when Executive Action showed here last year, a year ago December, before the two showings, but I will be at Hartnell College tomorrow night in Salinas at 8 o'clock, and if there are people that want to hear that lecture and want to ask me questions about the research or what is happening, I will take any questions that you want answered, because this particular program, I just give the news and my opinion of the news and don't have a talk show. So if you want me to answer questions about political assassinations or anything that's on your mind, come out to Salinas tomorrow night. I want to also announce that there is a new book out by Bob Cutler. Bob has written several books, one on the Chappaquiddick affair, one called Bullet 399, and he has an absolutely fantastic book. I just got it this week called Crossfire, Evidence of a Conspiracy. It's by Bob Cutler, and it's $15. But for those of you that can scrape that money together and are serious researchers or really want to study the crossfire in Dallas, Texas that killed President John Kennedy, this is the most magnificent book that I've seen on the subject. The address is Cutler Designs, Box 1465, Manchester, Massachusetts, 01944. The book is called Crossfire, Evidence of a Conspiracy, Bob Cutler. It's $15. Now, if you want the local libraries to get this book, I may send some information to our local libraries, and those of you that hear the show and you want this book ordered, tell them about it. Cutler Designs, Manchester, Massachusetts. Bob takes all the theories of how many bullets were shot at Dealey Plaza and the photographic evidence, the ballistic evidence, and has charts and diagrams of the shot directions where the gunman stood or could have stood, the autopsy, the original autopsy drawings, ballistics evidence, the testimony of various people. He takes apart the famous Bullet 399 that was on the stretcher after John Kennedy was killed and John Connally was shot. And he has a diagram in there of how many shots. There are different theories among the various researchers and writers about how many shots went out at Dealey Plaza when John Kennedy was killed, and how many assassins there were, and whether they stood behind President Kennedy's back or in front of him, or both. And he has charted out, William Manchester, who wrote Death of a President, said there were 2 shots, that Lee Harvey Oswald shot 2 shots, and there was one assassin, Lee Oswald, and he shot from behind John Kennedy. Then the U.S. government said there were 3 shots. The U.S. Secret Service, the FBI, the Warren Commission, David Bellin, who's now the investigator for the Rockefeller Committee, Gerald Ford, Mr. Latimer, a doctor from New York, and he's got the list of 5 people who defend the Warren Commission report that there were 3 shots, 1 assassin, Lee Oswald, and 1 shot from behind up at the 6th floor window. And these people stick with the Warren report version. Then he has 4 shots, and Josiah Thompson and John Thomas Buchanan, Cyril Wecht, Joe Jostein in Europe, and he's got David Welsh and David Lifton, and he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 persons who believe there were 4 shots, and that there were 2 or 3 assassins, and some of them were stood behind and some were in front of the president. He himself believes that there were 5 shots, and it breaks it down to whether there were 4, 5, 6, or 7. And there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that there were from 1 to 5 gunmen, and that some stood behind the president, some stood in front. And standing alone are the Warren Commission members and the FBI. And since then, persons have taken the fragments of the bullets and where they were located in photographic work the Warren Commission didn't use, and charted and diagrammed this and come out with a story of a excellent, well-concealed crossfire based upon witness testimony and physical evidence. And anybody who can afford that book or wants to get it from the library, it is the newest of the books by the researchers, an excellent book. Next Thursday night, March 27th, a week from this Thursday here in Carmel, March 27th on Thursday night, Hidalgo Rivero is going to have another program on Good Night America. That's American Broadcasting. And last month, a couple of weeks ago, he showed the Abraham Zapruder films, and he had such a reaction to that film showing Kennedy's head go backwards when the fatal shot came to the head, that Hidalgo Rivero is going to have Mark Lane and Dick Gregory, and they'll discuss their doubts about the Warren Commission. There'll be other researchers on the show, and then along with them, he's invited Arlene Specter, the lone Warren Commission member, the one who created the story that Lee Harvey Oswald shot 1 bullet that went through the back of John Kennedy and exited out of him and went into John Connolly and went through Connolly's chest and wrist and leg and came out pristine and whole on a stretcher. Arlene Specter will do his juggling act, his balancing act on the Hidalgo Rivera show. Good Night, America, March 27th. Down in Los Angeles, Mort Saul's show, Both Sides Now, is on the air every night, I believe, in the weeknights. And this next Thursday or Friday, he's going to have Lake Headley and Don Freed talking about the SLA is the CIA and the role of the Los Angeles Police Department, the Department of Corrections, and the San Francisco Police and the FBI in the SLA story. And the following week, I'll be down during the Mort Saul show on Friday night discussing my research, the second Oswalds, and the saga from Dallas to Watergate. Now, all of this is breaking. These radio shows are coming out. The TV shows are coming. An AP Wire story yesterday was on the news. Howard Hughes ought to testify to the court. Now, as I mentioned before, I did a story with Stephanie Caruana in December for Playgirl on the burial of Howard Hughes. I never heard from any of the Hughes people. They're usually the first to sue or the first to get angry. There was no response to this article that he was buried. And I questioned at the time why Howard Hughes never has to appear in court when other people have to go to court, how he gets large government contracts and defense contracts when he hasn't been seen in 20 years. The Hughes Medical Foundation should be exploded wide open to see if it's a CIA front for behavior modification and brain surgery and hypnosis. The Watergate testimony showed the role of Howard Hughes, and they're not asking him to step forward in the paying of $500,000 to Humphrey and $500,000 to Nixon, and the extra cash that Bieber Bozo had or Rosemary Woods, and yet no Howard Hughes steps forward. The allegations that Howard Hughes is the CIA, that he uses the CIA and he used it through Robert Mayhew, no Hughes steps forward. Now finally, after all this time, Las Vegas publisher Hank Greenspun's attorneys told the state Supreme Court this last Friday that Hughes should be treated by the courts just like anyone else. Now this is what I've been saying on radio talk shows around the country. Attorney Ralph L. Denton of Las Vegas argued that Hughes, the billionaire recluse, allegedly living in the Bahamas, should be required to make a personal appearance before a court reporter. Denton is seeking a deposition from Hughes in connection with Greenspun's $142 million suit against the Hughes Corporation, which was formerly the Hughes Tool Company. Hughes attorney Samuel Lyon said Greenspun had paid some of the interest on the loan. They were arguing about a loan on a Paradise Valley Country Club, but they did not say whether or not they would make, the judge did not say whether or not he would make Hughes appear. And Greenspun said it does not mean that Hughes, because he has idiosyncrasies or a peculiar lifestyle, that does not mean that he is not equal under the law. Just because he has a peculiar lifestyle, that does not mean he is not equal under the law. And this is the thing that I've been arguing about seriously, that this person has been named in so many lawsuits and in so many iffy areas that control our country by means of political assassinations and funny money being passed around, not accounted for, cash not accounted for, that could have gone to the Wallace shooting, could have gone to Mary Jo Kopechne death, could have been used for the guard that killed Robert Kennedy, could have been used to manipulate Sirhan. Sirhan, all of this cash is floating around and has very suspicious links into one direction, and it's very important to break this thing open because it's very tight. And I was glad to see an AP Wire service this week saying that because he has a peculiar lifestyle does not mean that he is not equal under the law. Now, the Patty Hearst story is breaking. This is a ridiculous escapade that may be coming to a close in the next week. We don't know how long it'll go on. As I said last year when they disappeared in May, that there'd be Patty sightings. This would be a new occupation of the FBI for a long time. The trail from Los Angeles at the shootout, May 19th, 1975, seems to have gone from L.A. to Las Vegas, through Colorado to South Canaan, Pennsylvania, and now it leads either to Mexico or Berkeley, California. Now, one of the things I worried about in my realist article in August 73, called the Senate Select Committee as part of the cover-up, was that the Mojave Desert was being closed off to outside traffic, and the justification for it was that the dune buggies were ruining the desert land. But I knew that there was more to happen, either military operations or enclaves or safe houses, through this area from San Bernardino almost up to Las Vegas. And I was very suspicious in the summer of 73, why the Mojave Desert was closed off. So I can't analyze all the things coming out in the Hearst episode right now, but here are some clues. When these people are caught, or if they are caught, let us find out the road they took when they left Los Angeles in a white van, and did they have private roads through the back roads that the government had closed off that nobody else could use. Remember that Charles Manson used a safe house called the Barker Ranch, and they were picked up for stealing some dune buggies. It was only a fluke that the Manson family was picked up when they were, because after the Sharon Tate LaBianca murders, they were taken by the sheriff's department, arrested, then released, and they went to a safe house out in the Mojave, at the edge of the Mojave, and I wondered if the SLA would be trafficked out from Los Angeles through these safe houses. Now, I know Patty Hearst wasn't living in the black community in Los Angeles. That was just a way of harassing them. William Harris and Emily Harris are allegedly members of the Indiana State Police, the narcotics squad. I got this from Alex Bottas in Indiana, who works with Sherman Skolnick, a researcher in Chicago. It's very logical that they ended up in Pennsylvania at a safe house. I can't think of a better place. There was a connection of the SLA to the CIA linked to Spain. I call it the Spanish connection, and there was one to Pennsylvania, and this has to be broken down in areas of who knew the terrain and the territory. Colston Westbrook of the CIA, the man who set up the SLA in Vacaville Prison, was from Pennsylvania, from this Lancaster area. Willie Wolf, the connecting link of the Colston Westbrook military group to the California group, Nancy Ling Perry and Joseph Romero, hometown Pennsylvania, fairly near where their safe house was. Dr. Marcus Foster, who was murdered with the cyanide bullets, lived in Pennsylvania before coming to California, and Russell Little, remember the SLA moved from Miami and stalked Dr. Marcus Foster, allegedly went up in Pennsylvania before both moved to California. There's a link here in this small community of what was going on in this particular state, and then there's two well-known espionage agents from the Warren Commission, Mr. Coleman now from Pennsylvania, and Arlene Specter, who created that bullet 399. And Patty had a very nice summer in a house rented for $2,000, and they were hardly living the life of radicals. They were secreted away in a home owned by a New York City fireman, Timothy O'Sullivan. So one of the questions I would like to know about the Mojave Desert is what road they used out of Los Angeles to get to Las Vegas, where they stayed. I'd like to know about the Pennsylvania safe house in terms of Timothy O'Sullivan. He's a fireman in New York who paid $38,500 for the tax. Now, if we want to break the SLA as a CIA, some of you in Boston and New York who are listening to the show, do a little investigative work. Find out what kind of an income Mr. O'Sullivan makes as a fireman. Maybe find out what kind of income tax he has and he paid on this income, how much down payment he paid for this house, if he in fact owns the house, what sort of wages he has, and how many summers has he spent in Pennsylvania himself. You see Tony Laswitz and Mr. Caulfield and John Mitchell, and we have a whole bunch of Watergate, known Watergate-related Justice Department men living in New York City, and I believe that the whole SLA thing was made out before the Watergate broke and was taken off even though the Watergate was falling down. This was the entree into American terrorism and to stir up and divide radical groups. So I think it's important to find out just a little bit, if you can, about Mr. O'Sullivan. I put in a request a while back similar to this on this Andrew Topping, who was supposed to kill Nixon in the White House, and got fantastic results from somebody in the East, which we'll do on a show. So I'm just putting out a feeler here to find out if anyone can about this particular man in New York City, if he uses it as his summer place. Another clue about this thing is a Wendy Yoshimura, one of the girls who's supposed to be with the Harrises, and Patty Hearst at the time, who was allegedly a fugitive and a radical, a Japanese girl, Japanese descent. She had communiques in her car at the time that her friends were arrested called Communique for Revolutionary Army. She and 3 others had threatened to bomb the Naval Architectural Building at the University of California campus at Berkeley. And one of her co-partners in this particular revolutionary group was William Brandt, who's now out at Soledad Prison nearby here. It's near Carmel. He was arrested with explosives, and he's inside the prison. Now, Miss Yoshimura allegedly is with Patty Hearst and the Harris, as I say, and she had visited Brandt or knew him or worked with him and was co-partner. If she didn't visit him at Soledad, she was escaped the arrest on the charges that he went to prison for. And why wouldn't the Department of Corrections, if they know, or the FBI know, when they're looking for a radical terrorist group in the Berkeley campus, why wouldn't they make the connection if there was an SLA about this particular Wendy Yoshimura? Because Mr. Brandt was out at Soledad the same time as Donald DeFreeze. And Jack Scott, the man who allegedly provided the transportation for the SLA, who paid the rent for their safe house in Pennsylvania, visited William Brandt in Soledad in February 28, 1973, which was 1 month before Donald DeFreeze was allowed to walk out of Soledad prison. Did Scott have anything to do with DeFreeze leaving? Did he have anything to do with the transportation for DeFreeze? And is Mr. William Brandt in Soledad prison as a real revolutionary, or are these agent provocateurs inside the prison to stir up a lot of confusion with the radical groups in order to make the FBI and Mr. Kelly tell us that the country is going in the hands of the radicals? I have an article here from the New York Times dated March 13th. The security aide for the Bureau of Indian Affairs said he was an FBI informer. And I bring this up at this time because a very close friend, the chief of security officer of the American Indian Movement at Wounded Knee, was an FBI agent by the name of Douglas Durham. And he lived very closely with Dennis Banks, and he lived with Russell Means. And when they were tried at Wounded Knee, the FBI claimed they had no agents inside the line. And now he says he was working for the FBI all the time. This Douglas Durham was a close friend in the American Indian Movement and worked with them, and he was turning over intelligence and information to the FBI. He was paid $1,000 a month or $1,100 a month, and betraying his friends at the time of the entire siege, the entire lengthy trial back east in St. Paul. This government agent was appearing as a close friend of the Indian Movement and in the whole thing. And after the 71-day occupation of Wounded Knee and after the trial, this man services and said he's a paid federal agent. Now that's the kind of thing going on inside the SLA to keep this charade going, to get these long trials going, to harass people and get them arrested. There are many people behind the lines who are acting like comrades and brothers and sisters of the SLA, and they will surface like Douglas Durham to be working for the federal government. You just wait and see, and time will prove that I'm right about this matter. The FBI lost their man. They were chasing Jack Scott on Ashby Avenue in Berkeley this week, and they claim that he got away from them. Have you ever heard of anything so ridiculous? The FBI lost Patty Hearst at every turn. They lost the green cars that were rented by the Hibernia Bank. They lost the moving out of every safe house. They lost the area of the safe house when Dr. Marcus Foster was killed. The FBI lost fingerprints. They didn't have fingerprints. Now they come up with Patty's fingerprints. The FBI was behind in this entire thing, and I cannot believe that the police and the FBI blundered unless they wanted to blunder. The SLA had 3 vans that were purchased for them, and they never explained who paid for them or how they got them. And then one white van takes them east that was rented by Jack Scott, allegedly by Jack Scott. And Jack Scott was sitting with his father in Las Vegas or in Berkeley when a subpoena came to the father to ask him to testify about what his son was doing. And he's sitting right in the room, and they don't give him a subpoena. And he goes home, and then when they come back and they want the son, the father says, well, you just missed him. He was sitting in the room. So the FBI have not even subpoenaed the man who paid the rent. And Patty Hearst was supposed to have lived on 92nd Street on Broadway last summer. She and the Harrises probably took in some shows on Broadway, and this radical terrorist group went right from Vegas, the heart of mafia land and used territory, up through the Mojave Desert from Los Angeles, through Vegas to New York City, 92nd Street, and then for a nice summer in Pennsylvania. And that's your great radical terrorist group. It's a lot of baloney, and I certainly hope that the story just keeps going a little more before they catch them, because the clues will get even tighter, and history will prove also that this was one of the big hoaxes that didn't quite get off as our Justice Department wanted it to. Hopefully the whole foolish thing will end soon. Some of the truths we'll never know, and some you'll find out in your lifetime. Now, I'm going to talk about the article, switching now to the John Kennedy Oswald thing, the article by Jim Squires in the Chicago Tribune. This is the way it begins. This is March the 16th, 1975. A prominent Midwestern governor, respected for his intelligence and rational judgment, privately expressed concern recently that the investigation of the CIA might uncover, among other things, agency links to the assassinations of the Kennedys, Martin Luther King, and the shooting of George Wallace. This is a prominent Midwestern governor. It said, we read daily what we only suspected in the past about J. Edgar Hoover and the Central Intelligence Agency. So the article goes on to link certain links of Lee Harvey Oswald to the Central Intelligence Agency, and it names Clay Shaw. It mentions Clay Shaw, who was an agent of the Central Intelligence Agency, and Jim Garrison targeted him, and but couldn't prove a link of Clay Shaw to Oswald. The article by Jim Squires is somewhat apologetic, but the point is at least it gets in the news. He passes it off as saying the best that anyone can do is to say that Oswald passed out pro-Castro leaflets in the building that was owned by Shaw, and that Shaw, international trader, passed out information to the CIA at one time or another. Well, Jim Squires entirely wrong about that best they can do between the links of Clay Shaw to the Kennedy assassination, because Shaw was in Europe when Nazi General Reinhard Gehlen was brought. The deal was made to bring him home to the United States by Allen Dulles. Clay Shaw was in the CIA. In front of Clay Shaw's building where Oswald handed out the pamphlets. Those pamphlets were paid by a man named Osborne from the CIA. There was a man named Osborne Bowen on the bus to Mexico with Oswald, I've mentioned before. And when they all arrived in Mexico, they were all at an apartment of a CIA agent. There are two CIA agents by the name of Harry Dean and Richard Case Nagell, Nagell, and their FBI reports about CIA agents by the name of Ronald Augustinovich and Mary Hope. And these reports indicate that the assassination planning took place in Mexico September through November 63, and at the meeting in the apartment in Mexico was Guy Bagalden, CIA agent Albert Osborne, the one who was sitting on the bus with Oswald, and Richard Nagell and William Seymour, who was one of the doubles of Oswald, and Lee Oswald was there, and Amelia Santano. Clay Shaw was down in Mexico at the time. David Ferry was there. Other participants that were there were Jack Lawrence, Fred Lee Chrisman, Jim Braden, Jim Hicks, Breck Wall, Jack Ruby, and Larry Crawford. The JFK assassination was carried off in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963, but a team was in Mexico City, CIA people, and the links of Oswald to the CIA and to Clay Shaw are much stronger than Mr. Squires knows at this time, even though he mentioned it. Now, the second goodie in the article by Squires, he's trying to show the links of Oswald to the CIA, and he says there was a second relationship to the CIA, Oswald, that was hardly more fruitful. This is Jim Squires, but I'll show you how he passes that off and what the truth is. He said there was a man named George DeMohrenschildt, a Russian-born petroleum engineer who came to the USA in 1938. The Warren Commission concluded that DeMohrenschildt had no connection with the assassination. It did not make a claim about his relationship with the CIA. DeMohrenschildt and his wife were in Guatemala when the CIA launched the Bay of Pigs invasion, and he later turned over his films to the U.S. government. This fact alone led many conspiracy buffs to conclude that DeMohrenschildt was at least an informer for the CIA and had undoubtedly told the agency of his friend Oswald. Now, DeMohrenschildt's testimony is the most important testimony in the entire Warren Commission, and the Chicago Tribune is passing off the name DeMohrenschildt because he gave information to the agency and he may have told them about Oswald. But the fact that DeMohrenschildt turned over documents to the government about the pay of pigs had absolutely nothing to do with indications that DeMohrenschildt was involved in the John Kennedy assassination. He was very much involved in the John Kennedy assassination, even though he lived in Haiti from April 1963 until November 1963. He played a major role in the Kennedy assassination from June 62 to April 63. He was the Warren Commission's most important witness. They had 552 witnesses and about 30,000 documents, and if one witness held the Warren report together, it was this George DeMohrenschildt, and he did work for the federal government. He and his wife, Jean DeMohrenschildt, gave to the Warren report a total of 164 pages of testimony. And every other witness, when you took the witnesses, the police and the doctors and ballistics experts or whatever, they averaged from 3 pages to 17 pages of testimony. I'd say an average would be about 11 pages average for each of the 552 witnesses. DeMohrenschildt and his wife gave 164 pages of testimony out of the 552 witnesses, and no member of the Warren Commission was present. For 164 pages of testimony, not one member of the Warren Commission was present, and DeMohrenschildt worked for the CIA. The only person present, besides Mr. Jenner, who asked questions of George DeMohrenschildt, was Air Force officer, historian Alfred Goldberg, who was to write parts of Oswald's life. The Pentagon sent over a historian to take down what DeMohrenschildt said and weave it into a fabrication and a fiction, a book of fiction about a Lee Harvey Oswald that no way resembled what the FBI was collecting in exhibits and documents to be printed in the last 16 volumes. Now, why was DeMohrenschildt the most important witness in the whole Kennedy assassination? If you're going to have a political assassination that is not a stabbing or a choking or tripping over a cord or hit on the head with a baseball bat or drowning or plane crash, if you're going to have a shooting, and this was a shooting, and you're going to have somebody aiming at a particular person, you need a weapon. You have the alleged assassin, the patsy, has to have a weapon, and DeMohrenschildt is the only living link of Lee Harvey Oswald to a weapon in 26 volumes of pages. Oswald never owned a rifle. Oswald never shot this rifle. He never saw the rifle. It was planted behind some boxes in the Texas School Book Depository building. And the photograph of Oswald holding the rifle was superimposed at the chin. It was Oswald's face from the chin up, and it was somebody else's body. It was not Oswald's body. Oswald never had a rifle, but DeMohrenschildt testified, alone in the room with historian Goldberg, that in Easter, that was just, 11 years ago now, Easter 1963, he stopped by late at night to visit with Lee and Marina Oswald, and he walked in the door and he said, "Why did you shoot General Walker?" The well-known right-wing member of the Birch Society had been shot at in April. And then allegedly Marina Oswald, they'd gotten out of their bed, put on a robe, and came down, answered the door. Marina Oswald said to Mrs. DeMohrenschildt, "Do you want to see Lee's rifle?" And she took them into a back room in a closet and showed them a rifle, and then closed the door, and they went out, left a baby present for the child, and departed. And DeMohrenschildt's testimony and his wife's testimony is the only link of Oswald to the General Walker shooting. That was a military operation. There were 2 people that came up in a car, shot a bullet into the bookcase, didn't intend to kill Walker at all, and left. Lee Harvey Oswald never shot at General Walker. He never shot at John Kennedy. And DeMohrenschildt's testimony was to be turned around and perverted, And to made to look that he was like a communist sympathizer or a Marxist. DeMohrenschildt was supposed to be the very freewheeling kook of the community, the ne'er-do-well, just like these athletes are being displayed with the SLA thing as being the radical, taking Patty Hearst on this trip for the summer, this great radical act, as if this was a revolutionary act, a big thing. All the time while the prison is planning its second siege of letting men out and escape to form a new SLA, this best friend deal is just an image that's put up there, and I doubt if it in fact can hold up under any strong testing. So the testimony of DeMohrenschildt and Marina Oswald, Jean and George DeMohrenschildt and Marina Oswald were the only three people that were responsible for the lie, the outright lie that Lee Harvey Oswald owned a rifle. And if he didn't own a rifle, there was just no way that there was going to be this political assassination. And then the Chicago Tribune and the San Francisco Chronicle make another link of Oswald in New Orleans with Guy Bannister, anti-Castro Cuban organization. They had their office at 544 Camp Street, and it backed up to Oswald's office when he went in one door for his pro-Castro literature. He backed up to their office, which is the CIA headquarters in the Anti-Communist League of the Caribbean. And these links of Guy Bannister in New Orleans and David Ferry and Jerry Brooks, the Minuteman, and those are all written up as links to the JFK mystery. But it did make the Chicago Tribune, not the AP Wire Service or UPI yet, but San Francisco papers and the Tribune. And then, as I say, there was the editorial of Dick Nolan, which is a first for him, who's defended every foul conspiracy and evil act, who's saying that right now, as things go along, we see that the CIA worked with the Mafia. We know that with their dock strikes, they used Lucky Laciano. Now it turns out the Mafia was used in Sicily to put down Mussolini, and that the pre-Castro Cuba was a Mafia colony. This is Dick Nolan talking. But then he said, all this sinister intrigue, there remains the long shadow of doubt as to the most monstrous crime of all, the assassination of President John Kennedy. The clamor for truth about Dallas grows louder every day. And he quotes Dick Gregory's feelings about the assassination, the research, and then Dick Nolan says, here in California, we have unfinished assassination evidence, which was raised briefly during the last governorship campaign. That's when Baxter Ward ran on a ticket to open up the Robert Kennedy assassination. It said he asked for a new trial for Sirhan, the convicted assassin. The issue subsided without a satisfactory review of the facts. We have a long and murky road to travel as our agencies begin to ask questions about the intelligence community, organized crime, and related foul deeds. Now, I've waited 2 years since Watergate first broke in '72. It'll be 3 years in June for what I called Watergate West. But here it is coming out in the newspapers, a murky road, foul play. Let's find out what's happening. And from Los Angeles or from San Francisco, the articles are coming out. There's one now from the Dallas Times-Herald, if you would believe it. New JFK death probe urged. This is by Dave Montgomery, staff writer. U.S. Senator Ralph Yarborough wants the rumors laid to rest. He wants the story of the Kennedy assassination told. He wants to know if the CIA is going to be investigated. He feels that there's evidence that there was a conspiracy that killed John Kennedy. He's worried about the trajectory of the shots in Dallas. So the Dallas Times-Herald, of all things, March the 7th, 1975, a large article asking for a new probe. And that is quite an article, collector's item for somebody like me who's been saving these things for 11 years from the Dallas Times-Herald. And now our time is up. Again, the editorial in the San Francisco Chronicle, it was the same thing. Write to your Congressman Henry Gonzalez. Support his resolution, House resolution, to open up the Kennedy assassination. It's House Resolution 204. Write to any members of the House of Representatives you respect. Write to Senator Frank Church to open up the CIA Kennedy killings. That's all for this week. They're running out now, and I'll see you next week. I hope the exposures keep folding out as quickly as they have been this last week. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next week on Dialogue Conspiracy.
has been Dialogue Conspiracy with political research specialist Mae Brussell, who for 10 years has been researching the facts behind political assassinations and conspiracies in this country. Dialogue Conspiracy originates with KLRB FM in Carmel, California.